a lot of people got this wrong idea about Jesus and about Christianity, as somehow the narrative has gotten changed that God doesn't care about sin. He just loves us all and he's forgiving of us all. No, God hates sin. I don't know how the culture has slid to confuse that. The other side of that.
Hey everyone, we are back with part 2 of In the Beginning, a conversation on Genesis 1:1 with Jim Piper, Matt Martin, and Winston Harris. Let's jump in. And the question, what was God doing before? In the beginning, Ecclesiastes 3 says God sets eternity in the hearts of men. And so there's this appetite to want to go beyond time, right? To also transcend time, right? There is a desire that almost beckons us into this curiosity that there has to be more. There has to be a creator, right? Whether you say agnostic or atheist, at your core, you cannot get away from this innate, ability to recognize it's not just what we see, that things aren't just as they are, but there is more. And then some of us are more courageous than others to actually pursue that appetite. But that question in and of itself is humanity, right? It is, man, what was God doing? I want to know, and it's that appetite that almost sustains us in our pursuit of, who is he? Who is this God that has no beginning and has no end? That speaks to who he is, the fact that we have that desire. So it's this interesting, relationship that we see where God set that in us to find him, if you will.
I've always loved that verse. I had a guest on the show last week, and we were talking about dying and the graces and the theology of death, and she said something that I never had really thought of before. I'm kind of jumping off of your statement, Winston, about eternity in the hearts of men, and when she started talking about, and we're not talking yet about the fall or sin, but here we are. Well, it's okay. We're going to talk about the fall and sin a little bit. But he said, in God's kindness, when a lot of people got this wrong idea about Jesus and about Christianity, as somehow the narrative has gotten changed that God doesn't care about sin. He just loves us all and he's forgiving of us all. No, God hates sin. And in fact, he massacred sin on the cross. He absolutely declared all-out war against sin on the cross. I don't know how the culture has slid to confuse that. The other side of that is his incredible love for us. And then what Whitney said, the dear lady I was interviewing this last week, she said, and in God's kindness, he doesn't make us stay in these fallen bodies forever. He finally lets us loose from these bodies. He says, we don't have to live 800 years anymore or 1,000 years anymore. We're 70 and out, 80 and out, maybe 100 and out. And I just thought, gosh, I never really thought of it that way, because we tend to call death the last enemy, and it is. But she had such a great way with her words, and she's such a good writer. She said at the point of death is when death and heaven are just like a slice of piece of paper away, from one another. It comes that close, and you can just sense, God's goodness, there.
But I think the idea here also is, and God don't miss a trick, and, and sentence structure and all of this matters. But let's just look at, and now the Bible was written, this part of the Bible was written in Hebrew. So but let's look at our English structure, sentence structure that we have. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So the subject is God. The subject. What we're talking about is God. The verb here being creative, and then the object being the heaven and the earth. The problem here is we get our eyes off of the subject and we put it on the object. And so and we're trying to answer our questions through the lens of the object and not through the lens of the subject. Because the word, the subject, God, is used like 35 plus times. I mean, if you read Genesis 1, it's just over and God and God and God. And, it's just over and over and over. And we know we always go wrong when we focus on us, the object, instead of where this is. So if I can, and again, I'm probably being a little philosophical here in how I'm saying this, but if I can, my filter can be back through who the subject is, who this is really about. We're trying to make it about us, because we live in the confines of time. But really, the Bible starts with who it's really all about. The subject, the who, is God.
Even when it's us, we're wanting to know, what are you, God, going to do with us?
There you go. No, that's good. That's good.
Yeah. Let me talk a little bit about Genesis 1:1 and have you guys add some color commentary. So in the beginning of time, God created the heavens and the earth. So I'm going to take off right where Matt left off. God, what this text teaches us, and this whole first chapter is who God is. Mm-hmm. I mean, at least this is the beginning of it. So by explaining God in this way, that God created the heavens and the earth, there's an idea called deism, meaning that God is beyond us, but not active in this world. So that eradicates that idea. You're active in what you create. So there is no God out there who is not attached here. And then, of course, there's atheism that says there is no God. This says there is God. And then there's pantheism that says everything is God. And no, God has separated himself from this. And then there's polytheism, where it says there's many gods, but they are finite. They are limited in their power. And we know that even the Israelites had some form of polytheism. And thus they struggle with idolatry and those kinds of things. But what we're introduced here now is Christianity is theism, meaning there is an infinite God who is beyond this universe, yet he's involved in this universe. He is the God of the universe, and that is who is being introduced to us. There's also some hints of some Christian doctrine that, I know a lot of us get tripped up in, and the word Trinity is not used in the Bible, but it's kind of a label, an umbrella label that we try to describe the community of God, that he is one, yet three separate personalities, three separate persons, three separate, and we go on and on with synonyms because we just don't have the language to describe who God is. But not to get into an area where it is not, I cannot say that I'm a linguistic scholar. But what is clear here is when the word God here is used, it comes from this root of Eloi or Elohim, which has a hint of plural versus singular. And then when you take in the next word, created, in the beginning God created, it is the word bara, which is only used in God's activity, and it's only used to express something brand new. And we're not on verse 2, but when you look at verse 2, it talks about the Spirit of God hovering. So you're introduced to God, then you're introduced into the Spirit of God. And as we know later on in Genesis 1, there's a statement that says, let us. And I don't know about you, but when I read Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and earth, I immediately my mind just goes to John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, right? And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And of course, it goes into the creation account, after that. So in the beginning, beginning of time, God created the heavens and the earth, the heavens and the earth, the seen and the unseen. Anything that exists other than himself, he created. That is the foundational. Let me introduce myself.
Before all things, all in all things, and through all things. And that just, our brains just want to explode when we think of that, so.
It's good news though, right? I mean, because otherwise we just stare up at the sky and we go, how'd that get there? Where am I? And we have a message. Why do we push back so much on the message? Why do we push back so much? I mean, John Piper wrote a book that said God is the gospel. And obviously he's backing up using a wide angle lens, and he's just saying, man, it's good news that there is a God.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? I mean, that is the good news. And the future doesn't rely upon us. He's got this. I mean, that's a big deal. But why, if this is such good news, why does the majority, I think that's accurate, why, and maybe it's not, but why does it seem like a good portion of humanity, and maybe the majority, rejects it?
I have some conversations with, some good friends similar to this one, and the conversation came up, about, the agency that we have, right? And if you think about, a timeless God who creates a construct to be in relationship with his creation, understanding what it would take for him to be in relationship. And, later on in the scriptures, it tells us, Jesus is the lamb slain from the foundations of the earth, right? So coming back to this beginning idea, God had to decide what it would take to be in relationship with his creation. There is this agency that creation has, right? Specific to humans, specific to man, male and female. And this willpower, if you will, this ability to choose. And understanding that if God loves his creation, he can't force us to love him back. So we do have to have the ability to reject or accept him. And he considered that, reality of rejection. And, Christ covers the potential for us to reject God, which creates the sin potential in the world. God has already considered all of these things. And so within us, we live with this constant reality that we have willpower. And I think for me, when you come to scripture and it tells us that our heart is deceptive, who can trust it? Another way might be to look at that our willpower, our ability to make decisions is deceptive. And we think we have more power than we actually do. And so when we are confronted with this idea that there is something more powerful than us, when we live in a time and an age and a space that tells us, live your own life, pursue your dreams, do all of these things, and you think you have more power than you do, only to be confronted with the gospel that tells you you're weak, you're broken, you actually aren't as powerful as you are. It is a bit offensive, and I think, Jim, you've said this before, but the gospel is a dangerous message. This idea that there is a God who is all powerful definitely rubs up against our willpower, and I think a lot of people, for different reasons, obviously have trusted more in their willpower than his power. Willpower is only to be used to be submitted to his power. That's when we fully see the most powerful forms of ourselves, is when we submit it to his power. So
yeah, I think of the word surrender. It's surrender is a difficult word for us, because there is a clash of the wills between us and God, and in fact that's going to come up this weekend. It has to. It's just part of what peace is about. And again, we're not even close to talking about the fall, but boy, it's easy to go there, right? I mean, I think that we back to what I was saying about Whitney and God's goodness and kindness of not sentencing us in these bodies, forever, because humanity isn't getting better. We know that, but the devastation of the fall. When I think about how the gospel can take root, is when we finally see things from God's perspective. Every time I think I'm a good golfer, the best thing I can do is find a PGA pro and play around with him. It just brings me back to reality. And it makes you go, I should just be happy that I'm out here, enjoying the weather. There's just something about truth that is cleansing, and it's helpful. I wanted to read Romans 1:20. And you guys are familiar with this, and this is Paul's dissertation about God's wrath on righteousness. Now that's not a scriptural title. The formatters of my Bible have that as a caption at the top. It's not exactly what you call seeker friendly. God's wrath on righteousness, but what he's doing, he's making a case where we deserve punishment if we try to stand on our own merits, right? So verse 20 says it this way: for his invisible attributes, speaking of God, for his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived. I like the word seen better. This translation says perceived. Ever since the creation of the world, have been clearly seen ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. I think if you read Genesis 1:1 to the vast majority of humanity, they'll embrace it.
Hey everybody, we're going to take a brief break from the Today Count show just to let you know that our very own Jim Piper has released a brand new book called Story: The Art of Learning from Your Past. And this is going to be for anyone who's looking to make a change in their life. If you feel stuck, if you want to grow beyond your current position, man, we just believe there are stories and truths in this book that will help you move into the future with a different perspective. We all have a story, and we can learn from that story to propel us into a strong future. Be sure to grab Story where books are sold, Amazon and wherever you find books. All right, back to the podcast.
And if they do embrace it, they have hope as they continue to get through the story of the Bible. But there are stumbling blocks along the way. I think what happened to me this week as I was really contemplating some things and thinking about some things is I think the reason why people push back is not because they don't believe in God. I think it's because they're angry with God. But that comes back, Winston, to kind of what you were talking about. It's a clash of the wills. I'm angry with God because he seems to get his way and I don't get my way. And I don't know that we cognitively say that, but I think that's kind of how it plays out. So what I love about Genesis 1:1 is it's kind of like a reset. Are you willing to grab your cup of coffee, get up in the morning, open your Bible, and hey, let's just start again. And as you do that, you're going to be introduced to the possibility. I don't know that Adam and Eve could have lived forever. I don't know that, but it appears to be a possibility. They are our representatives. As we all know, you can't contain sin in one person or in one community. It affects everybody. It's weird. I can get, like with Matt, I can get kind of philosophical, and it's like in the air, it's like tuberculosis. It's just like in the air. You can try to dig a shelter somewhere, but you've already been polluted. You've been
exposed. You've already been exposed.
Yeah, you've been exposed.
As we've walked through this idea that I can open the Bible, majority of people can open a Bible and you can even find comfort. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. I think I looked it up in Psalm 93. It says that your throne is established from of old. You are from everlasting. So when I that God is he's uncreated. He wasn't created. So that, we wrapping our head around that. But when I have confidence, because you'd already mentioned, I think it's bara or bara, or however you want to say it in Hebrew,
Yeah.
bara. It's a limited word in the Hebrew there used, because it means created from nothing. So when I and it's a faith element. I mean, I think we all can come to that, but it takes faith to believe in anything that
Exactly. Yeah. Faith is an active
that's
reality.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
if I'm an atheist, I have faith that there is no God. If I'm an agnostic, I have faith that, whatever. In all the chaos that can go on in my world, in my limited, finite world, whether I created it or somebody around me created it, and I'm having to live in this, there's something settling about when I sit down, and you said it, just made me think of it. Grab the cup of coffee, open my Bible, and say, the God who was not created, so there's no limitation on him, there's no nothing on him.
Yeah, the uncaused cause.
There you go. That he started all of this, and he has a plan, and his creation lacks nothing. There's no, even in what we would consider incomplete or undone or wish we could be, it's not. His creation lacks nothing, and that I can find the comfort and the solace in that, to sit down and say, okay, this book is going to lead, guide, comfort, instruct, whatever it is for the day, for the moment, for the hour.
When you were mentioning the Psalm, I was reminded of, not to beat a dead horse, but I was reminded of Psalm 90, where it's attributed to Moses. It says, a prayer of Moses, the man of God. I mean, it's just another sample proof or evidence that he did have pen and paper, and he was busy, doing whatever he was doing, even though it's, located in the book of Psalm.
There's something else that I've read a while back. I think Winston talked about kind of this fairy tale idea. Somebody say, oh, well, the Bible, is made up or whatever. But God shows humanity. Obviously, we're going to get to the fall and all, and, we'll walk through all of that. But when we're born into this world, we believe, that, we're God ordained, we're God, we're knit together by the hand of God in our mother's womb. And, we believe that. So in the beginning, God. So we start out in the beginning, even in our own lives but if you look, I read this years ago, the last words of Genesis. So it starts with in the beginning, God, but the last words in Genesis is in a coffin. Like it's like, and it's talking about Joseph, he was taken back, and but he was in a coffin. But we see the gospel, and we see mankind put together so well in the book of Genesis. And you talked about the gospel is presented. It's presented very clearly in Genesis 3, and we'll get there. But I think there's part of it that I have to understand, even the reality of God to humanity. You start with God. Yes, God created you. You were born because God has a purpose for you in this world. But in this fallen world, it ends in a coffin, most likely. And so the book of Genesis kind of frames that part of it, of South Forest. And so, anyway.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, I think that I wanted to share this with you guys too. And if for those who are listening to this podcast, whether you're listening to it in the audio or listen to it on YouTube, I want to do a little commercial for a book that I read some years ago by John Lennox. And I'm going to hold it up for those who can see the video. 7 Days That Divide the World, because this is about where we're about to enter into here, coming up soon. I found this to be very refreshing. I did not find it too heady. I mean, it's heady, but it's more philosophically heavy than it is scientifically heavy. Although he references and attributes a lot of thoughts to science. He does a really good job of truly explaining who the intended authors are, or not authors, readers. But again, this is for those who can't see it: 7 Days That Divide the World. Subtitle is The Beginning According to Genesis and Science. And I don't know that I agree with everything in the book, but that's not the point. I'm not here to hand out candy bars. We're here to have, a great conversation about something really important. The author is John C. Lennox, and it was a blessing. And I forget how I had learned about it. I think I was listening to something, like this, and someone referenced that, and I got it and consumed it, in a few weeks. So I was looking at it today and pulled it out of my library because I want to kind of go through all my highlighted sections in preparation for our next podcast. But people get maybe a little too over the top about the science thing, and I know I got a lot of fellow believers who want to defend Scripture and show the science in it. And I get that. I'm okay with that. But when I'm not sure God is giving a science lesson to everybody. And I'm not, but here's what I also believe. I don't believe that science has yet, nor can, prove the Bible wrong. So I look at it just from reverse. I don't look at it, what is the intent of what we're reading? Who is the audience? What is meant to say this? And obviously, yes, folks, we have to talk about whether it's an old earth or a new earth. And even in Christendom, there is a lot of people get mad about all that stuff. All right. So what we did today is we accomplished today is we laid the book of Genesis out for everybody. And we have this vision. I hope that we can get through it. 50 chapters is a lot. I hope that we get through it. But this Genesis 1:1, we just felt kind of needed a session or two by itself to kind of set the pace, the front porch. And there are so many bizarre stories in the book of Genesis that you don't want to miss it. So I hope that you will join us and that you'll stick with us. Pastor Matt and Pastor Winston will be regular on this, and we're going to just keep getting better at it, I think. And we do need to have at least one podcast that is entitled "A Necessary Mystery." Just has to happen. That has to happen.
This whole segment should be a necessary mystery. Genesis, a necessary mystery.
Or a messy beginning, but here we are.
Funny.
All right, guys. Well, thank you, and we'll get at this again.